Hello out there to all of my fellow nerds, and welcome back to my retrospective series looking at all the mainline numbered entries of the Resident Evil franchise, many of which I have been playing for the very first time. How exciting! Today's video is on Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, originally released in early 2017 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Microsoft Windows. Following the release of Resident Evil 6, Capcom made the decision to distance this franchise from the action-oriented gameplay that had been introduced in the 4th, 5th, and 6th entries, and instead return the series to its survival horror roots, focusing on exploration, inventory management, and puzzle solving. This was a breath of fresh air, because even though RE6 had performed well financially, its reviews were kind of sour. I think audiences were getting tired of the action-heavy approach to everything. The tone of these games were becoming more and more inconsistent with each new installment. Their stories felt restrictive, having to fill that cliché action movie mold, and I believe were unable to reach their full potentials as a result. The psychological aspect these games had at the beginning, their ability to frighten and disturb you, make you go through a sea of emotions while playing them, had become so diluted by the time RE6 came out that it was basically gone. Resident Evil was in a state of despair and essentially needed to be brought back from the dead. But Capcom managed to do so with Resident Evil 7. Like Frankenstein's monster, they were able to give the game, and the franchise as a whole, new life, new meaning. This game is scary. It is unsettling. It is far more methodical with its pacing than the last three games in the series were, combined. RE7 made me second-guess myself. It caused me to take my time and peer around every corner. I was squeamish in areas, and had to force myself to continue. I had not felt these same emotions playing a Resident Evil game since the remake of the original, and I think the biggest reason for that is its drastic change in gameplay into first-person. Being a first-person shooter, it's a genre I don't play very often, so I was out of my comfort zone. My sense of security had been completely stripped away, much like it was in RE1 with those awkward tank controls. Resident Evil 7 also reduces the scale of its story, having it take place in one location primarily, and this makes the narrative of the game a lot more focused and effective. It takes place on a large, dilapidated plantation in Louisiana, with you trapped inside a mansion and several smaller houses with a deranged family of cannibalistic lunatics, the Baker family, seemingly inspired by the one from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Each one of them has their own unique gimmick and confronts you in different ways. The father, Jack Baker, acts like the tyrants Mr. X and Nemesis, found in Resident Evil 2 and 3 respectively, and stalks you within the main house. Things can get really intense because the area you have to move around in isn't as big and spacious as some of the rooms were in RE2, for example, in the police department. There was a moment when Jack broke through one of the walls that took me off guard. It was the same trick used by Mr. X in RE2, and then again by Nemesis in RE3, but here it hit so much harder. I had to change my drawers after that one. Jack's wife, Marguerite, is in the old house and searches for you with her lantern. She moves much slower than Jack, attacks you with her various insects, and the gameplay in this section takes on more of a stealth-based approach. There are some solid jump scares with her as well. After knocking her into that pit, which fills with insects, appearing to have killed her, you return to find her mutated, and she reaches for her lantern with an elongated arm. It honestly gave me chills, and what made matters worse is that you had to climb down into the hole right afterwards. It sucked ass through a straw. I wanted to run in the opposite direction, and then you have their son, Lucas Baker, the most psychotic of the bunch. He taunts you throughout the game, putting you through a series of sadistic traps, like the maze of puzzles he sets up in the family's barn. It feels like you are in a Saw movie. Because of the setting and the nature of RE7's story, having you fight and evade the members of the Baker family, there are very few enemy types in this game. It puts more of an emphasis on exploration, finding useful resources, and solving puzzles than it does in its combat, which some people have taken issue with since its release, but I think RE7 benefits from it. The atmosphere here is some of the best in any Resident Evil game. Even though you may not be shooting at stuff constantly, you are preparing for when you will, and when those sequences do pop up, they leave an even greater impact on the player, in my opinion. Capcom found ways to keep you on your toes when not in combat. You'll hear footsteps, the creaking of doors opening and closing. Even if nothing is right in front of you, you will still get nervous, paranoid, and stop and look around. There's this grandmother in a wheelchair that will just appear where she wasn't before. You'll hear something move, the wheels of her chair, and then bam, there she is. It's a very subtle thing. She doesn't speak or attack, but it will send chills up and down your spine every time it happens. A lot of the elements found in the early Resident Evil games return here in 7. You have the ability to craft healing items, ammo, and now psychostimulants that reveal the locations of nearby collectibles for a limited amount of time. Item boxes return along with a grid-based inventory system, safe rooms where you can collect your bearings, and tape recorders that let you manually save your progress, replacing the typewriters of old. On harder difficulties, you will only be able to save if you have a cassette tape on hand, which is a much better implementation of this finite saving system than what was found in the first Resident Evil game, far more accessible in this day and age for those out there who may not have the time for long gaming sessions. You can upgrade your health, reload speed, and even purchase an additional weapon, the Magnum, by inserting enough antique coins into the respective cage within a few of the safe rooms. Antique coins are found in hidden areas throughout the game. You can also find VHS tapes that, when inserted into a nearby player, allow you to play through sequences, found footage style, from the perspective of previous victims of the Baker family. These were some of my favorite parts of the game. They were just so different, felt like scenes from horror movies, especially the one with the TV crew, and added an additional layer to everything you were experiencing as the main character during the main game. Some of the tapes help you find clues needed to solve puzzles on the Baker estate, and one of them, entitled Happy Birthday, provides the solution for one of Lucas's death traps you find yourself in later on in the story. The weapon combat in Resident Evil 7 is really fun. You've got a variety of handguns, machine guns, shotguns, a flamethrower, grenade launcher, even a chainsaw at one point, during a battle with Jack Baker in the processing area in the basement of the main house. It gave me a lot of Motel Hell vibes with the dueling chainsaws, for those of you out there who have seen that movie, or have even heard of it for that matter. Bonus points if you have. I found the remote bombs to be really satisfying to use in this game. There was nothing like clearing out an entire hallway of enemies with the press of a button. One complaint I have seen regarding the combat in RE7 though is in regards to its use of a dodge mechanic. I found the dodging to be really awkward. I wasn't able to get the timing down the first few times I tried using it, so I ended up forgetting I even had it. But from what I've heard, if you spam it or master the timing, the game becomes a cakewalk, so I didn't want that to happen. Besides, it looks ridiculous. Being able to block everything just by putting your arm up? That's so dumb. Alright, so let's get into the story of Resident Evil 7. The man you are playing as is named Ethan Winters, who travels to a rundown plantation in Louisiana in search of his wife Mia, who has been missing for 3 years, that had sent him a mysterious video message telling him where to find her. The Baker Ranch is such a creepy setting for this game, and one of my favorites in the entire Resident Evil franchise. Surrounded by swampland, and in the nearby vicinity of a salt mine, the entire entire area feels so deserted and lifeless. It's in the middle of nowhere, cut off from the rest of society. While the game may be set in 2017, these locations are very archaic, sorta stuck out of time. Ethan manages to locate Mia very early on in the game, within the farmhouse's basement, and she alludes to the fact that Jack Baker is her father. Before the two of them can make their escape, Mia becomes hysterical, going through some sort of transformation, and attacks Ethan. She comes at him with a knife and stabs it through his left hand, before returning to normal. Some sort of supernatural force seems to be influencing Mia. She refers to it as her, and that it's trying to claw its way back into her mind. Following a mysterious phone call from a woman named Zoe who offers to help Ethan, over the next few minutes, Mia continues to battle with this unknown influential force, and eventually succumbs to it. She stabs Ethan in the left hand again, this time with a screwdriver, pinning him to a wall. She then proceeds to cut off his entire left arm with a chainsaw. Get used to these kinds of visuals, because in Resident Evil 7 and 8, Ethan suffers a lot of hand and arm trauma, like a lot, so much so that it became a running gag on the internet. You end up fighting Mia with the pistol you find, and not only is it apparent that she possesses superhuman levels of strength after throwing you earlier, but extreme durability as well, taking several bullets to the head, just shrugging them off. Unfortunately, to save your own ass, Ethan is forced to kill Mia. So tragic. But before you can ask yourself just what in the fuck is going on, you are struck from behind and stepped on by Jack Baker, who officially welcomes you to the family. Ethan's arm is reattached with stitches and staples, and when he awakens, he finds himself at the baker's dinner table, surrounded by Jack, his wife Marguerite, their son Lucas, and the grandmother. They try to force-feed him cooked human body parts. Yummy. Marguerite leaves the room after her and Jack argue, and then Jack and Lucas follow after hearing the phone ring, believing it to be a police officer who has called the estate numerous times. Ethan is able to break free of his restraints as the creepy grandma watches on. You wonder if she's even still living. After some exploring, Ethan meets a deputy police officer named David Anderson through a broken, boarded up, and barbed wire covered window. The officer had been dispatched to investigate the area following a series of disappearances. You meet with the cop in the main house's garage. Deputy Anderson is suspicious of Ethan and begins questioning him. Distracted, he doesn't realize Jack had snuck up behind him and is killed when a shovel is driven into the back of his head with a lethal velocity. Following this, you have your first of many boss encounters against Jack Baker, and the one in the garage is probably my favorite of the bunch if I were to be completely honest. I just love the location of it. It's a cool visual. The area is small, tight to maneuver around in, but there is plenty of stuff to hide behind and use against him, mainly the car in the center of the room, which ends up being used by both characters as a weapon, which is pretty funny. During this battle in the garage, it becomes apparent that Jack, much like Mia earlier, possesses superhuman levels of strength and durability, able to regenerate tissue. After the fight, Jack is seemingly killed and his body severely damaged, but as you explore the rest of the house, he continues to come after you in a grueling yet gratifying cat-and-mouse sequence. Something I had to get used to in this game was the fact that opening up the map didn't pause it, leaving me open for attack. I had to use a lot more strategy in this one, didn't have that safety net like before in many of the other games. Throughout your run-ins with Jack, you receive more phone calls from Zoe, who reveals herself to be Jack's daughter. Eventually, you find yourself in the mansion's basement and go up against these viney, rotting fungus monsters that the Bakers have apparently been creating from the people they have been capturing. Once you reach the dissection area, you have another battle against Jack, the one involving the chainsaws I mentioned earlier. Afterwards, Ethan is contacted by Zoe once again, inside your new safe room, a trailer, parked out in the yard. She tells him that the entire Baker family, including herself, are suffering from some sort of infection that needs to be cured with a special serum. She also informs Ethan that Mia is alive, thanks to the regenerative properties of the infection. You then make your way into the old house to find the serum ingredients, and it's here where you are avoiding Marguerite with her lantern. You also reunite with Mia briefly, but she is forcefully captured by Lucas and dragged away. After you acquire the serum components and dispose of Marguerite in the estate's greenhouse, who had mutated into this disgusting monster with elongated limbs. Honestly, the design of her is just nasty, fucking gross with that bubbly white stuff around her crotch. You make your way back to the trailer to meet with Zoe face to face. Unfortunately, by the time you get there, she had also been captured by Lucas. In the refrigerator, you find the disembodied head of Deputy Anderson from earlier, with a note from Lucas pinned to the back of it, telling you to return to the dissection room in the mansion's basement. There, you find the rest of the police officer's body, and have to reach your hand into his neck to retrieve the snake key. For the next while, you follow Lucas's breadcrumbs throughout the house, gathering a series of key cards in order to enter the ranch's barn, which Lucas has turned into a giant series of death traps. Lucas may not seem the most educated amongst the Bakers at first glance, but he is extremely cunning and gifted with various forms of technology. Inside the barn, you have to carefully avoid several explosives he has armed in one section. He gives you several fake codes for a door that cause a sharp blade to swing down and kill you if you remain still. He builds this makeshift battle arena where you have to take down a bunch of fungus monsters, even a larger bloated one at the end. And then you have to relinquish all of your weapons and gear and enter his birthday puzzle, the same one you had played through from the perspective of one of the victims earlier. However, this time you are able to outsmart Lucas, escape his trap, and in frustration he runs away. Ethan rescues Zoe and Mia, and Zoe is able to create 2 doses of the serum. Jack Baker returns once again, heavily mutated, and following a battle, Ethan is forced to inject him with one of those doses to kill him permanently. At this point, with only 1 dose remaining, you are forced to choose, to either cure Mia or cure Zoe of their infection. Choosing Mia gives you the good, canonical ending, and choosing Zoe gives you the alternate, bad ending. I chose to cure Mia in my playthrough, the one I captured for this video. That's the ending I will be elaborating on in this review, and to be honest, that's the ending I assume most people would pick when playing this game for the first time. That's the one it naturally points to. Mia was the reason Ethan went to the Baker estate to begin with. She was the one who set all this into motion, the one you were after. Choosing Zoe, even if she did help you a few times throughout the game, would be a cop-out. It would do the story a disservice. Anyways, after you defeat the mutated Jack Baker and choose to cure Mia or Zoe, I do believe the narrative of Resident Evil 7 unravels a little bit and loses some of its intrigue, both in terms of its story elements and its gameplay. The first 2/3 of this game are superb, some of the strongest storytelling and pacing the Resident Evil series has ever had. Taking on all the members of the Baker family was so captivating, and solving all of the puzzles within the mansion, slowly opening that puzzle box as you progressed, was something sorely missed from these games, and so refreshing to experience again. But once it starts going into the cause behind everything that's happening, I start to lose interest a little bit. Ethan and Mia attempt to escape on a boat, which is capsized by more of those vine-like things. Ethan is knocked overboard, and then your control switches over to Mia. While looking for Ethan, she finds herself on this wrecked tanker ship, the SS Annabelle. She has visions of this little girl named Evelyn, who refers to Mia as her mother. Mia has suppressed memories, which are restored, and she is revealed to be this top-secret covert secret agent working for an unnamed company, which is later revealed to be, I believe, a criminal organization called the Connections. They had been developing Evelyn as a bioweapon, one who has the power to infect people and take over their minds with a psychotropic mold. It was Mia's job to look after Evelyn and escort her on the ship, but she somehow escaped, marooned it, and infected Mia, making her believe she was Evelyn's mother. Evelyn was obsessed with having a family, and through Mia, went on to infect the Bakers and lure Ethan to their estate. The Bakers, while not the most loving and functional of families, were still human, innocent, in the wrong place at the wrong time, and were tragically transformed into violent killing machines, monsters, by Evelyn's influence. Interestingly though, not all of the Bakers were being controlled by Evelyn. Lucas had been immunized against her by the Connections, so he could observe her for them. However, he still managed to convince her she had command over his mind and body, which allowed him to reap the benefits of the mold's regeneration. Lucas was the only real lunatic among the Baker family. Reading several notes and emails you find throughout the game, you learn of his troubled youth, his mood swings, psychopathic tendencies. He was a sadist and masochist long before Evelyn came into the picture. I had mentioned that Lucas runs away following your encounter with him in the barn as Ethan, but he does return in the Not a Hero DLC set after the events of the game. It has you play as Chris Redfield, pursuing Lucas, who had captured several of his fellow soldiers in the salt mines. The DLC provides a bit more backstory on Lucas's relationship with his family, never really liking them to begin with, and not having any remorse over their deaths, and of course, where he had been since disappearing in the main story. You discover a secret laboratory being operated by the Connections. Lucas plans on betraying the organization and has killed all of its researchers. At the end, you get to battle Lucas in a mutated form, seeing as you never got to during the events of the main game. This boss fight is easily the hardest in Resident Evil 7. I hear it's damn near impossible on the harder difficulties. Back to the main plot though, when you play as Mia on the tanker, tracking down Evelyn, the story takes a sharp detour. It doesn't even feel like you are playing the same game anymore. As a location, the ship is pretty dull and uninspired compared to the locations in the rest of the game, making the whole sequence very forgettable. Adding in Mia as a second playable character was completely unnecessary in this game. Giving her this insane backstory overcomplicates things and feels really forced. It seems like no one in the Resident Evil series is allowed to be a normal human being. And the fact that everything is the result of an evil little girl, come on now, how cliché can you get? After you leave the shipwrecked tanker, you take control of Ethan again. You find the Connections lab in the salt mine, and this sequence of the game was the most challenging for me. I had been conserving my ammunition, but there was one area in particular where I just had to run through it. I didn't have the resources to take all the enemies out. You end up synthesizing a toxin capable of killing Evelyn, and return to the Baker house to confront her. Ethan overcomes the hallucinations she creates, and it's revealed that Evelyn had been the grandmother all along, having been rapidly aging ever since she escaped. Evelyn mutates into a giant monster and acts as the final boss of Resident Evil 7, if you don't count the one against Lucas in the DLC, but unfortunately, it's one of the weaker ones in the franchise in my opinion, feeling more like an interactive cutscene than anything else. You could probably beat it with your eyes closed. It's that scripted and formulaic. Anywho, you kill Evelyn. Military personnel arrive, one of which thinks he's Chris Redfield, though it looks nothing like him. An injured Mia is tended to on a helicopter, and a logo for Blue Umbrella is seen on the side of it. Blue Umbrella is a company founded from the ashes of the original, whose purpose is to clean up the mess caused by its predecessor, but we'll see if it stays that way. Only time will tell. I'd say Resident Evil 7 is one of my favorite installments in the franchise, when looking at its gameplay at least. The switch to first person was a nice change of pace, and the tense and more frightening atmosphere in it makes it one of the scariest entries in the series too, a return to form, more in line with what had been established in the early days of Resident Evil. Like I had mentioned, the methodical pacing in the first half or two-thirds of RE7 is incredible, some of the best in any RE game, just that the ending is a bit of a mixed bag for me. Some of the ideas I like, while others felt unneeded and constrained. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Resident Evil 7. Do you agree with some of the points I made in this video? Or do you think I'm completely full of shit and need to promptly go fuck myself? That's what's so fun about these games though, and these kinds of stories. We all have our own opinions and personal preferences with them. But if you've got time, feel free to leave your 2 cents worth down in the comments section below. I want to thank all of you who have been watching and enjoying my Resident Evil retrospective series thus far. We've got one final game to get to, the most recent installment, Resident Evil 8 Village. I can't wait. If you'd like to help ensure the future of this channel and its content, please subscribe if you have not done so already. Share the video to anyone you think might get a kick out of it, and become a producer over on patreon.com if you can. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and always stay nerdy.